The massive colony ship New Sol landed on Kepler 442b with a gentle thud that shook the ground for miles. Dr. Hyunwoo Kim pressed his face against the thick window of the landing bay and watched the welcoming committee approach. The Vellani were beautiful creatures, tall and graceful, with skin that looked like frosted glass. They moved with fluid motions that reminded him of dancers. What caught his attention most was how they walked directly through the falling rain without any protection. The droplets hit their translucent skin and seemed to make them glow brighter. Some of the Vellani were actually spinning in the rain, arms outstretched like children playing in a summer storm. "They seem happy to see us," said Ji-Hai Park, the colony's chief engineer. She stood beside Hyun-woo, checking readings on her tablet. "But look at them. No protective gear, no shelters, nothing. They're just standing in the rain like it's the most natural thing in the world." Hyun-woo nodded. "The preliminary report said this species has lived here for 50,000 years. Maybe they've adapted to their environment better than we thought." Through the intercom, they heard Captain Taimin Choi giving orders to the crew. "All personnel remain in sealed sections until we complete environmental analysis. No one goes outside without full protective gear. I don't care how friendly our hosts look." The Vellani delegation waited patiently as human technicians set up a meeting area. They had built a clear dome structure that would allow face-to-face communication while keeping the humans protected from the planet's atmosphere. Through the dome's walls, Hyunwoo could see other alien species had come to witness this first contact. The Korthax looked like giant insects with 6 arms and compound eyes. They clicked and buzzed to each other in their own language. Near them stood 3 Zelani, crystal-like beings that seemed to shift colors as they moved. All of these aliens stood in the rain without concern. Ambassador Thelana was the first Vellani to speak. Her voice came through the translation system as musical and kind. "Welcome to our world, humans of Earth. We are honored that you have chosen to make your home here among us." Captain Choi stepped forward, still wearing his environmental suit. "Thank you for your warm welcome, Ambassador. We're grateful for your hospitality. We hope to build a strong friendship between our peoples." Thelana tilted her head, and her skin shimmered with what the translation system identified as confusion. "Captain, may we ask why your people remain in protective shells? Our atmosphere is quite safe. Many species visit our world and breathe freely." One of the Korthax clicked loudly, which the translator converted to laughter. "Humans are known throughout the galaxy for their excessive caution. They test everything 3 times before they trust it." The Zelani that had been shifting from blue to green added, "It is an interesting trait. Most species would have left their ships by now." Captain Choi remained polite but firm. "We appreciate your understanding. Human protocol requires us to study any new environment carefully before direct exposure. It's not that we don't trust you. It's simply how we ensure our people's safety." Thelana's expression grew more puzzled. "But surely you can see that our rain brings life to everything it touches. Look around you. The plants grow strong, the animals thrive, and we ourselves have lived under these skies for countless generations. Even our visiting friends here have Never experienced any problems. Dr. Mi Young Kang, the colony's medical officer, spoke up. We understand that your world appears safe, Ambassador. But humans have learned that what's safe for one species might not be safe for another. Our biology is different from yours. Different how? Asked a Korthax trader. We have traded on this world for over 300 of your years. Our biology is certainly different from the Vellani, yet we suffer no ill effects. Hyun Woo stepped closer to the dome's wall. It's not just about biology. It's about being thorough. Humans have a saying, better safe than sorry. We prefer to study everything carefully before making decisions. The aliens exchanged glances. Through the translation system, these glances registered as concerned amusement and friendly worry. A Zilani scientist spoke in a voice like ringing bells. We have conducted many studies of this world's environment. Our instruments show nothing harmful in the atmosphere or precipitation. Perhaps we could share our data with you? We would be very grateful for your data, said Ji-Hai. But we'll also need to run our own tests. Human equipment might detect things that other instruments miss. This statement caused more puzzled looks among the aliens. Thelana spoke gently. Humans, do you not trust the wisdom of species that have studied the galaxy for millions of years? Captain Choi chose his words carefully. It's not about trust, Ambassador. It's about responsibility. If something happens to even one human because we didn't check carefully enough, we would never forgive ourselves. The rain continued to fall throughout the meeting. Hyun Woo watched the aliens move freely through it, some actually seeming to enjoy the sensation. The Vellani's skin grew brighter with each drop that hit them. The Korthax's shell-like exterior made clicking sounds as raindrops struck it. The Zilani seemed to absorb the water directly into their crystal bodies. Your caution is admirable, said Thelana, but perhaps unnecessary. This rain has fallen on our world since before any of us can remember. It brings growth to our crops, fills our rivers, and sustains all life here. To fear it would be like fearing the sun or the wind. Young-Soo Chen, a materials scientist, had been quietly taking measurements during the conversation. He approached Captain Choi and whispered something in his ear. The captain nodded and turned back to the aliens. We've detected some interesting atmospheric readings, Choi said. Nothing dangerous, but definitely different from Earth's atmosphere. This confirms that we need to take our time with environmental adaptation. The Korthax trader buzzed with what sounded like impatience. How much time do you need? We have seen many species adapt to new worlds in days, not weeks. However long it takes, Ji-Hai answered firmly. We won't risk our people's lives by rushing. As the meeting continued, more rain began to fall. The aliens seemed to become more relaxed and happy as the precipitation increased. They stood straighter, moved more gracefully, and their voices became more musical. Hyun-Woo noticed this change and made a mental note to study it later. Everything about the aliens' behavior suggested that the rain had a positive effect on them. But his human instincts told him to question even positive effects until he understood them completely. We will set up our research facilities, Captain Choi announced. Once we've completed our safety protocols, we'll be happy to interact more directly with all of you. Thelana bowed gracefully. Take all the time you need. We have waited 50,000 years to meet humans. We can wait a little longer. As the aliens departed, still walking freely through the rain, the humans watched from their protective dome. The sight was beautiful, but somehow unsettling. Every instinct humans had developed over millions of years of evolution told them to be careful, to test, to verify. They think we're being paranoid, Jihai said quietly. Maybe we are, Hyunwoo replied, but paranoid humans are living humans. The colony ship New Seoul settled in for what would be weeks of careful environmental testing. While the aliens played in the rain outside, the humans worked behind sealed doors and filtered air systems, following protocols that seemed overly cautious to everyone except themselves. None of them knew that this caution would soon save not just human lives, but the minds of every intelligent species in the galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since the humans landed on Kepler 442b. The research facility they built looked like a giant bubble made of metal and glass, completely sealed from the outside world. Inside, Dr. Sang-Min Lee worked at his laboratory bench, studying samples of the planet's rainwater under a powerful microscope. The lab was filled with the quiet hum of machines. Air filtration systems worked constantly to make sure nothing from outside could get in. Water purification units cleaned every drop that entered the facility. Even the food they ate went through multiple safety checks before anyone could touch it. Still nothing unusual, Sang-Min muttered to himself as he adjusted the microscope settings. He had been looking at rainwater samples for days, running test after test. The water looked normal under standard examination. It contained the usual minerals and microscopic life forms that you would expect from any planet's natural precipitation. Young-Soo Chen walked over from his workstation, carrying a new filter design. "How are the water tests going?" he asked. "Clean, as far as I can tell," Sang-Min replied. "Just like the Vellani said it would be. Maybe we really are being too careful this time." Young-Soo shook his head. "There's no such thing as too careful. Remember what happened to the colony on Kepler 1-86F? They trusted the local water supply, and half the colonists got sick from parasites that took weeks to detect." "That was different," said Dr. Mi-Young Kang as she entered the lab. "Those parasites were large enough to see with basic equipment. If there was something dangerous in this rain, surely one of the other species would have found it by now." Mi-Young carried a tablet full of medical data. She had been reviewing health records from the Vellani, Korthax, and Zilani who had visited their ship for routine medical examinations. All 3 species had volunteered to let human doctors study them, curious about human medical technology. "The alien physiology data is fascinating," Mi-Young continued. "The Vellani have been exposed to this planet's environment for thousands of generations. Their bodies show perfect adaptation to the local conditions. No signs of disease, no immune system stress, nothing that suggests environmental toxins." Sang-Min looked up from his microscope. "What about the visiting species? The Korthax and Zilani have only been here for a few centuries at most." "Same thing," Mi-Young said, scrolling through her data. "Perfect health across all tested individuals. Their immune systems show no signs of fighting any infections. If anything, they seem healthier than average for their species." Young-Soo frowned. That almost sounds too good to be true. When has any environment ever been perfectly safe for multiple species with completely different biologies? Maybe this planet really is special, suggested Dr. Hyun-Woo Kim as he joined the group. The Villani call it a paradise world. Perhaps some places in the universe really are as peaceful as they seem. But Young-Soo wasn't convinced. He held up his latest filter design, a complex device that looked like a small metal flower. I've been working on more advanced filtration systems, not because we found anything wrong, but because human protocols demand redundant safety measures. Better safe than sorry, Sang-min said, repeating the phrase that had become common throughout the colony. Exactly, Young-Soo nodded. This new filter can capture particles down to the molecular level. If there's anything in that rain, even something incredibly small, we'll find it. Mi-young studied the filter design on her tablet. The other species think we're wasting time. Ambassador Thelana asked me yesterday why humans need so many complicated machines just to test simple rainwater. Because we're humans, Hyun-Woo said simply. We question everything. We test everything. It's kept our species alive for thousands of years. The conversation was interrupted by Ji-Hai Park, who entered the lab with a concerned expression. We just received another offer from the Villani Council. They want to give us a cleansing ceremony where we would stand in the rain for an hour. To welcome the planet's blessing into our bodies, Sang-min laughed. That sounds nice, but I think we'll pass. That's what I told them, Ji-Hai said. But they seemed genuinely confused by our refusal. Thelana said that every species that visits this planet participates in the ceremony. It's considered an honor. Did any of them mention what happens during this ceremony? Asked Mi-young. Any specific effects or experiences? They described it as peaceful and enlightening, Ji-Hai replied. The Korthax trader said it helped him think more clearly about what truly matters. The Zilani scientist called it a moment of perfect understanding. Young-Soo and Sang-min exchanged glances. That sounds suspiciously like the rain might have some kind of psychoactive properties, Young-Soo said. Or maybe it's just the placebo effect, Mi-young suggested. Standing in warm rain on a beautiful planet probably does feel peaceful and enlightening. Hyun-Woo pulled up star charts on the main computer. I've been researching this planet's history. According to galactic records, Kepler 442b has been a neutral meeting ground for over 1,000 years. Multiple species conduct diplomatic meetings here because it's considered a place where conflicts naturally resolve themselves. Naturally resolve themselves? Sang-min repeated. That's an interesting way to put it. The records show that aggressive species become more peaceful after spending time here, Hyun-Woo continued. Territorial disputes get settled amicably. Trade negotiations that start hostile end with everyone satisfied. It's almost like the planet has a calming effect on visitors. Young-Soo stood up straighter. Now that definitely sounds like something in the environment is affecting brain chemistry. Humans need to figure out what's causing these behavioral changes before we expose ourselves to it. But what if the changes are positive? Mi-young asked. The galaxy has been more peaceful since this planet became a diplomatic center. Maybe whatever is here actually helps species get along better. Maybe, said Sang-min, But humans have a right to choose whether we want our brain chemistry altered, even if the changes seem positive. Ji-Hai nodded in agreement. Free will is fundamental to human nature. We don't accept mental modifications without understanding exactly what they do and having the choice to refuse them. The team spent the rest of the day setting up more sophisticated testing equipment. Young Su's new filters would be ready for use tomorrow. Sang Min prepared samples for genetic analysis. Mi Young scheduled more detailed medical examinations of willing alien volunteers. Outside their sealed facility, the rain continued to fall. The Villani could be seen through the windows, moving gracefully through their daily activities. They looked content and peaceful, exactly as they had for the past 3 weeks. But the humans remained inside, following protocols that seemed excessive to every other species they had met. They tested and retested everything, built redundant safety systems, and questioned every assumption. The other species called it paranoia. The humans called it survival instinct. What none of them knew yet was that this careful, methodical approach was about to uncover a threat so subtle and dangerous that entire civilizations had fallen victim to it without ever realizing what was happening to them. The rain fell on, patient and persistent, carrying its hidden secrets down from the cloudy skies above. 5 weeks into their stay on Kepler 442b, Dr. Sang-Min Lee made a discovery that changed everything. He was running rainwater through Young-Su's newest filtration system when something unexpected appeared on his computer screen. "That can't be right," he muttered, adjusting the microscope's settings. Under the highest magnification, tiny moving objects appeared in the filtered sample. They were so small that they barely showed up even with the most powerful equipment the humans had brought from Earth. The organisms were unlike anything in the databases. They moved with purpose, not randomly like simple bacteria. When Sang-Min watched carefully, he could see them change direction and speed as if they were responding to something in their environment. "Ji-Hye, you need to see this," Sang-Min called. Across the lab, Ji-Hai Park stopped her work on the atmospheric processors and came over to look. "What am I looking at?" she asked, peering into the microscope. "Life forms," Sang-Min said. "Incredibly small ones. Look how they move." Ji-Hai watched the tiny organisms swim through the water sample. "They do seem to have some kind of pattern to their movement. Are you sure they're not just responding to currents in the water?" "I thought so at first," Sang-Min replied. "But watch this." He placed a small electrode near the sample, sending out weak electrical signals. Immediately, the organisms began moving toward the electrode. "They're attracted to electrical activity. That's interesting, but lots of microorganisms respond to electrical fields," Ji-Hai said. "What makes these special?" Sang-Min pulled up more data on his screen. "Their size, for one thing. They're much smaller than anything the Villani or other species have in their biological surveys. And look at this." He showed her recordings of the organism's behavior over several hours. "They don't just respond to electricity randomly. They seem to be seeking out specific types of electrical patterns." Dr. Do-Hyun Yu entered the lab just as they were discussing the discovery. As the colony's neuroscientist, He was immediately interested in anything that responded to electrical activity. Did someone say electrical patterns? That's my area. Sang-min explained what he had found. Do-hyun bent over the microscope and watched the tiny organisms for several minutes. Fascinating. Their movement patterns remind me of neurons seeking connections. Can you generate different types of electrical signals? I can try, said Sang-min. He adjusted his equipment to produce various electrical frequencies. The organisms responded differently to each frequency, sometimes moving closer, sometimes moving away, and sometimes gathering together in groups. Wait, Do-hyun said suddenly. Try generating signals that match human brainwave patterns. Sang-min input the data for different types of brain activity. When he generated signals matching alert, focused thinking, the organisms became extremely active and moved directly toward the source. When he switched to patterns associated with sleep or relaxation, they moved away. They're attracted to active thinking patterns, Do-hyun observed. Specifically, the kind of brain activity associated with problem-solving and complex thought. Ji-hai looked concerned. So, these things are drawn to intelligence? It appears that way, Do-hyun confirmed. Let me test something else. He programmed the equipment to generate brainwave patterns from different species. The organisms showed strong attraction to patterns from humans, Korthax and Zilani, but less interest in Villani brainwave patterns. Why would they be less interested in the Villani? Asked Sang-min. Do-hyun frowned as he studied the data. The Villani brainwave patterns we have on file are different from what I would expect for a species of their apparent intelligence level. Their patterns are simpler, more regular, less chaotic than typical higher intelligence brainwaves. Maybe that's just how their species evolved, Ji-hai suggested. Maybe, Do-hyun said, but he didn't sound convinced. Or maybe there's another explanation. The three scientists spent the next several hours running more tests. The microscopic organisms consistently showed attraction to complex brainwave patterns and avoidance of simple ones. When they introduced samples from different parts of the planet, they found the organisms everywhere the rain fell. We need to tell the others about this, Ji-hai said finally. They called an emergency meeting in the colony's main conference room. Captain Tae-min Choi listened carefully as they explained their discovery. Dr. Mi-young Kang reviewed the biological data, while Dr. Hyun-woo Kim pulled up comparative studies from other planets. So these organisms are attracted to intelligent thought patterns, Captain Choi summarized. What does that mean for us? We don't know yet, Sang-min admitted. They're too small to cause immediate physical harm, but their behavior is concerning. Mi-young pulled up her medical scans of the alien species. I've been looking at brain activity in our alien volunteers. Now that I know what to look for, I'm seeing some interesting patterns. She displayed brain scans from Villani, Korthax, and Zilani subjects. The Villani show very regular simplified brain patterns. The Korthax and Zilani, who have been on this planet for extended periods, show similar simplification, but to a lesser degree. Simplification how? Asked Hyun-woo. reduced activity in areas associated with creativity, questioning, and complex problem-solving, Mi-young explained. It's subtle, but it's there. The longer a species has been exposed to this planet's environment, the more simplified their brain patterns become. Do-hyun leaned forward. What if these organisms don't just seek out intelligence? What if they actually interfere with it? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Young-soo Chen, who had been quiet during the meeting, finally spoke up. That would explain why every species thinks the rain is harmless. If these organisms are affecting their ability to think critically, they wouldn't be able to recognize the threat. But the affected species seem happy, Ji-hai pointed out. They're peaceful, content, cooperative. Maybe the organisms actually improve their quality of life. By reducing their intelligence, Captain Choi asked. That's not improvement, that's mental impairment. Hyun-woo pulled up historical records. Look at this data from species that visit this planet regularly. Over time, they show decreased innovation in technology, reduced exploration of new territories, and less questioning of established authorities. They become more compliant, Do-hyun observed, less likely to challenge the status quo or think outside established patterns. Mi-young added, and they all describe the experience as positive. They feel peaceful, enlightened, and content with their simplified existence. The scientists looked at each other with growing alarm. If their theory was correct, they had discovered something far more dangerous than a simple disease or toxin. They had found a form of life that fed on intelligence itself, reducing complex minds to simple, happy compliance. We need more data, Captain Choi decided. But we also need to be extremely careful. If these organisms really do what we think they do, exposure could rob us of the very mental abilities we need to understand and fight them. Sang-min nodded. I'll continue studying the organisms in controlled laboratory conditions. We need to understand exactly how they work. And I'll analyze more brain patterns from our alien friends, added Mi-young. If we're right about this, we need to document the effects clearly. As the meeting ended, the team members looked out the windows at the aliens playing happily in the rain. The sight that had once seemed beautiful now appeared ominous. Were they watching beings who had lost parts of themselves without even knowing it? The humans returned to their sealed, filtered environment, more grateful than ever for their paranoid safety protocols. Outside, the rain continued to fall, carrying its tiny passengers toward any mind complex enough to be worth simplifying. 7 weeks after landing on Kepler 442b, Young-soo Chen finished building his most advanced filtration system yet. The device could capture and analyze particles at the quantum level, revealing details that no other technology in the galaxy could detect. What it showed him made his blood run cold. Dr. Sang-min, you need to see this immediately, Young-soo called across the laboratory. Sang-min Lee hurried over to the new equipment. On the screen, the microscopic organisms appeared in stunning detail, but what they saw was far worse than anything they had imagined. They're not just attracted to neural activity, Young-soo said, his voice tight with concern. Look at this. He showed Sang-min recordings of the organisms approaching brain tissue samples. They actually burrow into neural matter. The images showed the tiny creatures drilling microscopic holes into brain cells and taking up residence inside. Once inside, they began to grow, sending out thread-like connections to neighboring cells. They're creating a secondary network inside the brain, Sang-min observed with horror. They're literally rewiring neural pathways. Dr. Soo-jin Oh, the colony's xenopsychologist, had been studying behavioral patterns in the alien populations. She rushed to the lab when she heard about the discovery. "This explains everything I've been seeing in the psychological profiles," she said. Soo-jin pulled up her research on her tablet. "I've been analyzing decision-making patterns in long-term Volani residents compared to recent arrivals. The differences are subtle but consistent." She showed them charts tracking problem-solving abilities, creativity scores, and independence measures over time. "Look at this pattern. New arrivals to the planet show normal ranges for their species, but after extended exposure, their scores drop significantly in areas like innovation, questioning authority, and complex reasoning." "How significant?" asked Sang-min. "Enough to fundamentally change who they are as individuals," Soo-jin replied. "They become more docile, more accepting of simple explanations, less likely to challenge established ideas. But here's the terrifying part. They report feeling happier and more content than ever before." Young Soo enhanced the quantum level images further. "The organisms don't just live in the brain tissue, they actively modify it. Look here." He pointed to areas where the creatures had built new neural connections. "They're creating pathways that enhance feelings of satisfaction and compliance while shutting down circuits responsible for critical thinking." Dr. Do-hyun Yu joined them, bringing brain scan data from their alien volunteers. "I've been comparing scans from different time periods. The changes are gradual but unmistakable." He displayed brain images side by side. "This Volani subject has lived on the planet for 200 years. Notice how simplified the neural activity patterns are compared to a typical member of their species. The areas responsible for abstract thinking, creativity, and questioning are barely active." "What about the other species?" asked Soo-jin. "Same pattern," Do-hyun confirmed. "The Korthax traders who have been coming here for decades show progressive simplification of thought patterns. The Zalani researchers who conduct long-term studies here gradually shift from groundbreaking discoveries to routine data collection." Dr. Mi-young Kang entered the lab with medical scan results that confirmed their worst fears. "I've been doing detailed neurological examinations of our volunteers. With the new quantum-level scanners, I can actually see the organisms inside, their brain tissue." She showed them brain scans that revealed thousands of tiny organisms throughout the neural matter of every alien they had tested. "They're everywhere, in the cerebral cortex, the hippocampus, the frontal lobes, every area responsible for higher cognitive function." "And the subjects don't know they're there?" asked Young Soo. "That's the most insidious part," Mi-young replied. "The organisms modify the brain in a way that makes the host feel completely normal. Better than normal, actually. They report feeling peaceful, wise, and enlightened." Soo-jin pulled up interview records. Listen to this. I asked Thelana yesterday about her thoughts on innovation and exploration. She said, "Why would anyone want to complicate life with unnecessary questions? We have everything we need, right? Here, peace and contentment are more valuable than restless curiosity." That doesn't sound like the response of a highly intelligent species, observed Sang-min. Exactly, Sujin agreed. But 200 years ago, Villani records show they were renowned throughout the galaxy for their scientific discoveries and philosophical insights. They were explorers, innovators, questioners. Now they're content to simply exist in harmony with their environment. The team realized they were looking at something far more horrifying than a simple parasite. These organisms didn't just steal intelligence, they made their victims grateful for the theft. "It's the perfect crime," Young-Soo said quietly. They rob entire civilizations of their mental capacity, and the victims thank them for it. Do Hyun studied the neural pathway modifications more closely. The organisms seem to enhance certain brain functions while suppressing others. They boost the production of contentment hormones while reducing activity in areas associated with curiosity and critical thinking. Like a drug that makes you stupid but happy, Mi-young summarized grimly. Worse than a drug, Soo-jin corrected. Drugs wear off. These changes appear to be permanent structural modifications to the brain. The implications were staggering. If their analysis was correct, multiple species had been mentally enslaved by microscopic organisms that made them too content to recognize their own enslavement. "We need to understand how this spreads," Sang-min said. "Is it just through rainwater?" Young-Soo checked his atmospheric readings. The organisms are in the rain, but they're also in the planet's water supply, the soil, and even the air in small concentrations. Everything on this planet is contaminated. How is it possible that no other species detected this? Asked Mi-young. Because you have to be looking for it specifically with very advanced equipment, Young-Soo replied. And more importantly, you have to have the mental capacity to recognize it as a threat. Once the organisms modify your brain, you lose the Ha-di-yo ability to see them as dangerous. Soo-jin made another disturbing connection. The galactic peace treaties that were signed on this planet, what if they weren't the result of diplomatic skill? What if the negotiators' minds were being altered to make them more agreeable? The room fell silent as they considered this possibility. For over 1,000 years, this planet had been used as a neutral meeting ground for resolving conflicts. What if the peaceful resolutions weren't due to good diplomacy, but to mental manipulation? "We need to warn everyone," Mi-young said. "Who's going to believe us?" Do-hyun asked. "And more importantly, who's going to be mentally capable of understanding the threat? Every species that spent significant time here has been affected." Young-Soo looked at his quantum scanner data again. According to this, the organisms respond to electromagnetic signatures from complex thought patterns. The more intelligent a species is, the more attractive they are to these parasites. So intelligence is a liability on this planet, Sang-min observed. "Not just a liability," Soo-jin corrected. "It's what marks you as prey." The humans spent the rest of the day documenting their findings, creating detailed records of the organism's behavior and effects. They now knew they faced an enemy that attacked the very minds needed to fight it. Outside their sealed facility, the rain continued to fall. The Villani danced in it with joy, the Korthax conducted their business peacefully, and the Zilani gathered their data contentedly. All of them were losing pieces of themselves with every drop that touched them, and all of them were grateful for the experience. The humans remained inside, protected by their paranoid protocols, possibly the only minds on the planet still capable of recognizing the horror that surrounded them. The emergency meeting in the colony's main conference room felt different this time. The air was heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. Captain Taemin Choi looked at the assembled team of scientists, knowing that what they had discovered would change everything about how humans viewed the galaxy. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Captain Choi said slowly. "These organisms don't just affect individual minds. They're systematically reducing the intelligence of entire civilizations." Dr. In-Ho Park, the colony's xenohistorian, had spent the past week diving deep into galactic records. His findings painted a picture that was even worse than they had feared. "Captain, I've been analyzing historical data from every species that has spent significant time on this planet. The patterns are undeniable." In-Ho displayed a series of charts on the main screen. "Look at the Villani's technological development. Over the past 50,000 years, for the first 49,000 years, they showed steady advancement. They developed space travel, advanced medicine, and complex philosophical systems. But for the last 1,000 years, nothing. No new inventions, no new ideas, no progress at all." Dr. Sujin Oh nodded grimly. "It's the same pattern in their cultural development. Ancient Villani literature shows complex themes, challenging ideas, and revolutionary thinking. Modern Villani writing is simple, peaceful, and never questions anything." "What about the other species?" asked Dr. Hyun-Woo Kim. In-Ho pulled up more data. The Korthax were once known as the galaxy's most innovative traders. They invented new forms of commerce, developed revolutionary trading routes, and constantly pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But the Korthax, who have been trading on this planet for 3 centuries, they follow the same simple patterns year after year. "And the Zilani?" pressed Hyun-Woo. "The most disturbing case of all?" In-Ho replied. "The Zilani were the galaxy's premier researchers. They made discoveries that advanced every field of science. But look at the research produced by Zilani who work on this planet." He showed them publication records. Simple cataloging, basic observations, routine data collection. No breakthrough discoveries, no innovative theories, no challenging questions. Dr. Do Hyun-Yu had been analyzing brain scan data from multiple species. The neurological evidence supports everything In-Ho has found. The longer a species spends on this planet, the more simplified their brain patterns become. And it's not just individuals, it's happening to entire populations. Captain Choi felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying that every species that uses this planet as a diplomatic center is being mentally compromised?" "That's exactly what we're saying," confirmed Dr. Mi-Young Kang. "And it gets worse. I've been analyzing the content of those peace treaties that were signed here over the past 1,000 years. Ma Young displayed treaty documents on the screen. These agreements consistently favor maintaining the status quo. They discourage exploration, limit technological development, and promote peaceful coexistence through acceptance rather than innovation. The organisms aren't just making individuals more compliant, realized Dr. Sang-Min Lee. They're shaping galactic policy toward stagnation. Young Su Chen had been running calculations on his tablet. If our estimates are correct, the organisms have affected the cognitive abilities of at least 12 major galactic civilizations to some degree. That represents billions of individuals across hundreds of worlds. The scale of the disaster was almost incomprehensible. This wasn't just a threat to one colony or one species. It was a force that was quietly lobotomizing entire galactic civilizations. But why? Asked Captain Choi. What do these organisms gain from reducing intelligence? Du Hyun had been studying the organism's behavior patterns. I think they feed on complex neural activity. The more sophisticated a brain is, the more energy it produces. But they can't simply drain that energy all at once without killing the host. So they modify the brain to produce a steady, sustainable output. Sang-Min continued the thought, like farming instead of hunting. They're harvesting intelligence, Su Jin said with horror. Turning thinking beings into mental livestock. In-ho pulled up more historical data. There's something else. This planet became a galactic meeting point about 1,000 years ago, right around the time that the general pace of innovation across the galaxy began to slow down. You think the slowdown is connected? Asked Hyunwoo. I think this planet has been broadcasting influential ideas across the galaxy, In-ho replied. Peace through simplicity, contentment through acceptance, wisdom through not asking difficult questions. And the species that spend time here spread these ideas to their home worlds. The implications were staggering. The organisms weren't just affecting local populations. Through their influence on diplomats, traders, and researchers, they were slowly reshaping galactic civilization toward a more docile, less innovative model. We have to warn everyone, Mi-young said urgently. Warn them of what? Du Hyun asked, pointedly. That they're too stupid to recognize they've been made stupid? The affected populations literally cannot comprehend the threat because the threat has removed their ability to comprehend it. Captain Choi realized the true horror of their situation. We're probably the only unaffected minds left who are capable of understanding what's happening. Not necessarily, said Young-soo. There might be other species that haven't had significant exposure to this planet, but the problem is reaching them before they dismiss us as paranoid humans making wild accusations. Su Jin had been analyzing communication patterns between species. There's another problem. The affected species are actively promoting this planet as a paradise. They encourage other civilizations to visit, to hold meetings here, to experience the peace that comes from accepting nature's gifts. They're recruiting for the parasites, Sang-Min said with disgust. Unknowingly, Su Jin clarified, they genuinely believe they're sharing something wonderful. The organisms have programmed them to be missionaries for their own mental enslavement. In-ho displayed a star map showing trade routes and diplomatic channels. Look at this network. Every major civilization in this sector has some connection to this planet. Through trade, diplomacy, or research, The influence is spreading. How long before the entire galaxy is affected? Asked Captain Choi, Young Soo. Ran quick calculations. At the current rate of contact and influence, maybe 2 or 3 more centuries before every major civilization shows significant cognitive impairment. The team sat in stunned silence. They were looking at the slow-motion conquest of an entire galaxy by microscopic parasites that won not through force, but by making their victims too contented and simple-minded to resist. "There has to be something we can do," Captain Choi said. "Finally." "There is," Sang-min replied. "But it's going to require us to do something that every other species will consider impossible and unnecessary." "What's that?" asked the captain. "We need to prove that paradise is actually hell," Sang-min said. "And we need to convince beings who have been programmed to be happy with their situation that they should want to change it." Hyun-woo looked out the window at the aliens playing peacefully in the rain. How do you convince someone they've lost something when the loss makes them incapable of missing it? "I don't know," Sang-min admitted. "But we have to try. Because if we don't, the galaxy as we know it, a place of innovation, exploration, and growth, is going to become a vast garden of contented, simple minds tended by invisible parasites." The humans faced a challenge unlike any in their history. They had to save civilizations that didn't want to be saved from a threat they couldn't see, using minds that had been programmed not to understand the problem. Outside, the rain continued to fall, patient and persistent, carrying its tiny passengers toward the next group of complex minds waiting to be simplified. 9 weeks after their arrival on Kepler 442b, Dr. Hyun-woo Kim stood before the planet's galactic communications array, preparing to send what might be the most important message in the history of the galaxy. The humans had decided they could not keep their discovery secret any longer, despite knowing how difficult it would be to convince anyone to believe them. "Array online and ready for transmission," announced Ji-Hai Park from the control station. "We can reach the home worlds of every major species within the next few hours." Captain Taemin Choi reviewed the message one final time. "Remember, we need to present this calmly and scientifically. If we sound panicked or paranoid, they'll dismiss us immediately." The first transmission went to the Vellani High Council on their capital world. Within an hour, they received a response from Counselor Velandra, delivered in the musical, patient tone typical of modern Vellani communication. "Greetings, friends from Earth. We have reviewed your concerns about our planet's precipitation. While we appreciate your thorough scientific approach, we find your conclusions puzzling. Our rains have blessed our people for countless generations. They bring peace, wisdom, and contentment to all who experience them." Hyun-woo felt his heart sink, but he pressed on. "Counselor, we're not questioning whether the rain feels good. We're concerned that it may be altering brain function in ways that prevent recognition of the alteration itself." The response came back quickly. "Dear humans, this theory seems unnecessarily complex. Why would you assume that contentment and peace indicate mental impairment? Perhaps what you call alteration is actually enlightenment. Your species is known for being suspicious of good things. Sometimes a gift is simply a gift." Dr. Soo Jin, O, who was monitoring the conversation, shook her head. Classic response pattern from affected individuals. They can't conceive that their contentment might be artificially induced. The next transmission went to the Korthax Trading Federation. The response came from Trade Master Kaelki Thon, whose communication patterns showed the simplified thinking characteristic of long-term exposure. To the planet. Human friends, your warnings are noted but unnecessary. Kepler 442b is known throughout our trade networks as a place of profitable and peaceful commerce. Our traders have conducted business there for 300 cycles without incident. If there were dangers, as you suggest, surely our experienced traders would have noticed. But Trade Master, Hyunwoo replied, our data shows that Korthax traders who frequent this planet show reduced innovation in their business practices. They follow the same routes and methods year after year without developing new approaches. And, why is this concerning? Came the reply. Proven methods work well. Why complicate successful patterns with unnecessary changes? Your human drive for constant novelty is not shared by all species. Young-Soo Chen, who was listening to the exchange, muttered, 300 years ago, the Korthax were the most innovative traders in the galaxy. Now they think innovation is unnecessary. The parasites have turned pioneers into sheep. The transmission to the Zelani Research Collective proved even more frustrating. Chief Researcher Crystal Tone Harmony responded with what sounded like wisdom, but was actually oversimplified thinking. Humans of Earth, your research methodology is admirably thorough, but your conclusions seem to overlook the obvious explanation. When beings experience peace and contentment on Kepler 442b, it is because the planet naturally promotes these positive states. Your assumption that this indicates mental compromise suggests a bias toward viewing harmony as weakness rather than strength. Chief Researcher, Hyunwoo tried again. We have documented evidence of microscopic organisms that physically alter brain tissue. These aren't philosophical interpretations. They're biological facts. Biology serves consciousness, not the other way around, came the reply. If brains change in response to a peaceful environment, perhaps this shows adaptation rather than infection. Your species seems to prefer complexity over simplicity, conflict over harmony. Not all changes are problems to be solved. Dr. Mi-Young Kang reviewed the brain scans they had sent with their transmissions. They're looking at clear evidence of neural modification and interpreting it as spiritual growth. The organisms have made them incapable of recognizing biological manipulation as anything other than natural evolution. The most disappointing response came from species that had not yet visited Kepler 442b. The humans had hoped these unaffected populations would be more receptive to their warnings. The Rigelian Science Academy replied with polite skepticism, while we respect human scientific capabilities, your claims about microscopic mind control parasites sound extraordinarily far-fetched. The species you mention as affected are known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and peaceful nature. To suggest that these positive traits result from parasitic infection seems to reflect human paranoia rather than objective analysis. 2. Centaurian colonial authority was even more direct. Humans, your reputation for excessive caution precedes you. Every species in the galaxy knows that you see threats where none exist. The idea that peaceful, content civilizations are actually victims of mind control is absurd. Perhaps you should consider that other species have simply evolved beyond your combative and suspicious nature. Dr. Do-Hyun Yu analyzed the response patterns. The unaffected species dismiss us because they think we're being typically paranoid humans. The affected species dismiss us because they're literally incapable of recognizing the threat. We're caught between skepticism and mental programming. Captain Choi tried a different approach. What if we invite representatives from unaffected species to visit our colony? Let them see our research firsthand? That might work, agreed Sang-min Lee. If they can examine our evidence in person, they might be more convinced. They sent out invitations to several species that had no significant contact with Kepler 442b. The responses were mixed. Some agreed to send research teams intrigued by human claims. Others declined, citing the expense of such distant travel for what they considered unlikely theories. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Hyan Woo received a private communication from a young Velani scientist named Velmar, who worked on a research station far from Kepler 442b. Human researchers, the message began. I have been analyzing historical records of my people's scientific achievements. Your warnings have prompted me to investigate patterns I had not previously considered. I am disturbed by what I have found. Velmar continued, Our ancient records show my people were once great innovators and explorers. We asked difficult questions and challenged established ideas. But modern Velani science consists mainly of confirming what we already believe. We no longer seek to push boundaries or explore new concepts. When I mentioned this observation to my colleagues, they seemed unable to understand why this change might be concerning. She's young, observed Sujin. Maybe her brain hasn't been fully modified yet. They invited Velmar to visit their colony for extended discussions. When she arrived 2 weeks later, the humans were shocked by the difference between her mental patterns and those of the planet-bound Velani. Your research is fascinating and terrifying, Velmar said after reviewing their data. But I understand why my people cannot see the threat. Even now, looking at this evidence, part of my mind wants to dismiss it as unnecessarily complicated. The idea that peace and contentment could be artificially induced and harmful feels almost impossible to accept. That's the insidious nature of the parasites, explained Do-Hyun. They modify the brain in ways that make the modification seem beneficial. Velmar agreed to undergo detailed brain scans. The results showed that even she had been partially affected by exposure during visits to her home world. If I am compromised and I can see the evidence clearly, how can we possibly convince those who are more severely affected? We need proof that can't be dismissed or rationalized away, said Hyun-woo. Something so clear and dramatic that even modified minds can't ignore it. What kind of proof? Asked Velmar. Sang-min looked at his laboratory equipment. We need to show the difference between affected and unaffected minds. Not just tell people about it, but demonstrate it in a way that's impossible to deny. How do we do that? Asked Captain Choi. We need to find a way to reverse the effects, Young-soo said quietly. If we can restore someone's original mental capacity and let them compare their before and after states, they'll be able to see exactly what they lost. The room fell silent as they considered this possibility. It was a dangerous proposition, attempting to reverse unknown biological modifications in living brains. But it might be the only way to create witnesses who could truly understand and communicate the threat. "The question is," said Mi Young, "can we figure out how to undo decades or centuries of neural modification without destroying the minds we're trying to save?" Outside the colony's windows, the rain continued to fall on, a planet full of beings who were losing their capacity to save themselves, one drop at a time. 11 weeks into their stay on Kepler 442b, the human colony had transformed into the galaxy's most advanced research facility. Every scientist worked with desperate urgency, knowing they might be the only minds capable of developing a solution to the parasitic threat. Young Su Chen stood in the engineering bay, surrounded by prototypes of atmospheric filtration systems. His latest design was unlike anything ever built, a molecular-level filter that could remove the microscopic organisms from an entire planet's atmosphere. "The theory is sound," he explained to the assembled team. "We create a network of atmospheric processors that generate specific electromagnetic fields. The fields disrupt the organism's cellular structure without affecting normal atmospheric components." Dr. Sang-Min Lee had been working on an even more challenging problem: how to remove the parasites from living brains without causing damage. "I've developed a treatment protocol that uses targeted electromagnetic therapy combined with specially designed medications," he announced. His laboratory had become a maze of medical equipment and test samples. "The organisms respond to very specific electromagnetic frequencies. If we can generate the right patterns, we can cause them to release their hold on neural tissue and be naturally eliminated by the body's immune system." "How long does the treatment take?" asked Dr. Mi Young Kang. "That depends on the level of infection," Sang-Min replied. "For someone like Velmar, who has only mild exposure, it might take a few weeks. For the planet-bound Velani, who have lived with these organisms for their entire lives, it could take months or even years." Dr. Do-Hyun Yu had been developing cognitive assessment tools to measure the effectiveness of treatment. "We need to be able to track improvement objectively," he explained. "The patients themselves might not recognize their own recovery because their ability to recognize cognitive improvement has been compromised." His tests measured creativity, problem-solving speed, critical thinking, and the ability to question established ideas. "I've designed these assessments to be culturally neutral so they work for any species." Captain Taemin Choi reviewed the progress with growing hope and concern. "This is incredible work, but we have a major problem. How do we convince affected populations to undergo treatment for a condition they can't recognize they have?" "We start with volunteers," suggested Dr. Soo-Jin Oh. "Individuals who are curious enough or trusting enough to try our treatment, even if they don't fully understand why they need it." Velmar had agreed to be their first test subject. The young Velani scientist understood the risks, but was determined to help save her people. "If your treatment can restore my mind to what it should be, I will serve as living proof of what my people have lost." The treatment began carefully. Sangmin used the mildest possible electromagnetic therapy while monitoring Velmar's brain activity constantly. Within the first week, changes became apparent. "My thoughts feel sharper," Velmar reported during a daily assessment session. "I'm noticing details I missed before. Questions I would never have thought to ask are occurring to me naturally." Do-hyun's cognitive tests confirmed the improvement. Her problem-solving speed has increased by 30%. Her creativity scores are doubling week by week. Most importantly, she's beginning to challenge assumptions she previously accepted without question. By the third week, Velmar was experiencing what she called an awakening. Her personality was changing as her full cognitive abilities returned. "I can see now how simplified my thinking had become," she said with tears in her eyes. "It's like waking up from a dream where everything seemed fine, but you were actually sleepwalking through life." The transformation was dramatic. The mild, accepting scientist who had arrived at the colony was becoming a passionate, questioning researcher who challenged every assumption and pushed for answers to complex problems. "This is what the Villani used to be like," Dr. Inho Park observed, comparing Velmar's new personality to historical records. "Brilliant, curious, innovative. Your people were explorers and philosophers, not content gardeners." Word of Velmar's transformation spread through unofficial channels. A few other aliens expressed interest in the treatment, though most remained skeptical. A Korthax trader named Klexnir agreed to try the therapy after Velmar personally contacted him. "I do not understand why I would need this treatment," Klexnir said when he arrived. "My life is peaceful and profitable, but Velmar insists it will help me, and I trust her judgment." Klexnir's treatment took longer because his exposure had been more extensive. The Korthax had been visiting Kepler 442b for centuries, and the parasites had deeply embedded themselves in his neural pathways. But after 6 weeks of careful therapy, the results were stunning. Klexnir began developing new trade routes for the first time in decades. He created innovative business partnerships and questioned traditional trading practices that he had previously followed without thought. "I had forgotten the joy of discovery," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "For generations, my people have followed the same patterns, content with proven methods. But we used to be pioneers. We explored new territories and created new forms of commerce. I can feel that drive returning to me. The success with individual treatments led young Sue to focus on larger-scale solutions. We need atmospheric processors that can clean entire cities, not just individual buildings," he announced. His designs were ambitious beyond anything attempted before. The processors would work like giant air purifiers, drawing in contaminated atmosphere and releasing clean air. "We can start with major population centers and gradually expand coverage to entire continents." Dr. HFY Park worked on making the processors mobile. "If we can fit them into spacecraft, we can help populations on other worlds too. The contamination isn't limited to this planet. It's spreading through trade and diplomatic contact." The logistics were staggering. Cleaning the atmosphere of an entire planet would require hundreds of processors working continuously for years. But the humans were determined to find a way. "We need to prove that large-scale atmospheric cleaning is possible," said Captain Choi. "If we can demonstrate success on a city-sized area, other species might be willing to support expansion." The colony chose a nearby Vellani settlement as their test site. With the permission of several recovered individuals like Velmar, they deployed a network of atmospheric processors around the city. The results exceeded their expectations. Within months, the cognitive abilities of the city's population began to improve. Children who had never shown curiosity started asking questions. Adults who had accepted simple explanations began demanding complex answers. But the improvements also created new problems. As the Vellani recovered their natural intelligence, they became horrified by what they had lost. Families struggled as parents and grandparents realized they had spent decades in a mentally diminished state. "We're not just treating a medical condition," observed Su-Jin. "We're dealing with the psychological trauma of an entire population realizing they've been robbed of their minds." The recovered Vellani became powerful advocates for treatment, but they also faced resistance from unaffected populations who couldn't understand why anyone would want to give up peace and contentment for the stress of complex thinking. "You're asking us to choose suffering over happiness," complained one untreated Vellani elder. "Why would anyone want to trade serenity for confusion?" Velmar responded passionately. "Because confusion that leads to understanding is better than serenity that leads to stagnation. You're not happy? You're sedated." The philosophical debate highlighted the challenge facing humanity. They had developed the tools to save galactic civilization, but they still had to convince that civilization it wanted to be saved. Young-Su completed designs for planetary-scale atmospheric processing systems. Sang-Min perfected treatment protocols that could help billions of affected individuals. Do-Hyun created assessment tools that could track recovery across entire populations. The humans had become galactic civilization's doctors, armed with cures for a disease that made its victims love their symptoms. Now they faced the hardest part of their mission, convincing the patients they needed treatment. 6 months after their arrival on Kepler 442b, the human colony had become the center of the most important scientific breakthrough in galactic history. The treatment facility buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of species came to witness something unprecedented: the restoration of minds that had been quietly stolen across generations. Velmar stood before the Vellani High Council, but she was no longer the same being who had left her research station months earlier. Her restored intelligence blazed in her eyes as she addressed the leaders of her people, many of whom could barely comprehend what she was telling them. "Council members, I stand before you as proof of what we have lost," she said, her voice carrying a passion that modern Vellani had not heard in centuries. "I have experienced both states of being, the peaceful simplicity that you call wisdom, and the complex awareness that is our true heritage." Counselor Velandra listened with the patient confusion typical of the affected. "Young Velmar, you seem agitated and troubled. The humans have filled your mind with unnecessary complications. Why would you choose anxiety over peace?" "Because peace without choice is not peace. It's imprisonment," Velmar replied. Council members, our ancestors, wrote poetry that challenged the nature of existence itself. They built technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. They asked questions that had no easy answers because they understood that growth comes from struggle, not from acceptance. She gestured to a holographic display showing ancient Villani achievements compared to modern Villani society. Look at what we were and what we have become. We have traded our souls for serenity. In another part of the colony, Klexnir was having a similar conversation with representatives of the Korthax Trading Federation. The transformed trader had regained abilities his people hadn't seen in centuries. Trade masters, I have rediscovered the joy of innovation that our ancestors knew, he announced, his compound eyes bright with renewed intelligence. For generations we have followed the same routes, made the same deals, thought the same thoughts. But we used to be explorers. We created new forms of commerce that revolutionized galactic trade. Trade Master Kael responded with the simplified thinking of the affected. Klexnir, proven methods ensure profit. Why risk failure with untested ideas? Success comes from following established patterns. Because patterns without growth become prisons, Klexnir replied. I have spent the last month developing 3 new trade routes that will increase profits by 40% while opening markets to species we have never contacted before. When did we stop dreaming of new possibilities? The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. As more individuals completed treatment, they became living demonstrations of the difference between affected and restored minds. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Crystal Singer Him, a Zilani researcher who had undergone treatment, presented her findings to the Zilani Research Collective. Fellow researchers, I have experienced a cognitive renaissance that has allowed me to propose 17 new theoretical frameworks in the past 2 months. Before treatment, I spent years simply cataloging existing knowledge without questioning its foundations. Her research supervisor, Crystal Tone Harmony, responded with typical affected logic. Harmony, your new theories are unnecessarily complex. Simple truth is more valuable than complicated speculation. Why disturb established understanding with chaotic questions? Because established understanding stops us from discovering new truths, Him replied. I can remember thinking as you do now, believing that simplicity was wisdom. But now I understand that what we called wisdom was actually intellectual poverty. The psychological impact of recovery was profound. Treated individuals often experienced what they described as grief for their lost years, anger at their mental, imprisonment, and overwhelming joy at their restored capabilities. It's like being born again, explained Velmar during a public demonstration. But it's also like mourning for the person you should have been all along. I look at my people and I see sleepwalkers who think they're awake. The demonstrations were broadcast throughout the galaxy. For the first time, unaffected species could see clear evidence of the threat. The difference between treated and untreated individuals was so dramatic that even the most skeptical observers began to take human warnings seriously. Dr. Hyunwoo Kim received a communication from the Rigelian Science Academy. Humans, we owe you an apology. The evidence presented by recovered individuals is undeniable. We are prepared to support your efforts to address this threat. Similar messages arrived from species across the galaxy. The Centaurian Colonial Authority, which had dismissed human concerns as paranoia, now requested immediate assistance in scanning their populations for parasite exposure. But the greatest breakthrough came when the humans successfully demonstrated planetary-scale atmospheric cleaning. The Villani city that had served as their test site was transformed within months. Children who had never shown curiosity began asking complex questions about the nature of reality. Artists created works that challenged traditional forms and explored new concepts. Scientists resumed the innovative research that had been abandoned for generations. "The change is miraculous," reported Dr. Sujin Oh, who was documenting the social transformation. "Crime rates have actually increased slightly because people are beginning to question authority and challenge unjust rules. But innovation, creativity, and technological progress have exploded. The success led to requests for help from across the galaxy. Young-Soo Chen's atmospheric processors were soon in production on dozens of worlds. Sang-Min Lee's treatment protocols were being adapted. For multiple species, the economic implications were staggering. As recovered populations regained their innovative abilities, technological progress accelerated at unprecedented rates. New discoveries, inventions, and artistic achievements emerged daily from treated communities. We're witnessing the rebirth of galactic civilization, observed Dr. In-Ho Park. For 1,000 years, the galaxy has been slowly intellectually stagnating. Now we're seeing what happens when that artificial limitation is removed. The parasites themselves became subjects of intense study. Scientists discovered that the organisms were not native to Kepler 442b, but had arrived from somewhere in deep space millennia ago. They appeared to be a form of biological weapon designed to create compliant populations. "The scary thing is how well it worked," said Do Hyun Yu during a research conference. "If humans hadn't arrived with our paranoid protocols, the galaxy might have slipped into permanent intellectual decline without anyone ever realizing what was happening." The implications extended beyond medicine and biology. Philosophers debated whether beings had the right to live in artificially induced contentment. Religious leaders questioned whether the parasites were evil or simply another form of natural selection. Politicians struggled with the ethics of forced treatment versus personal choice. Some individuals choose to remain in their simplified state, reported Mi-Young Kang. They say they prefer peace to the anxiety that comes with complex thinking. Do we have the right to impose awareness on beings who choose ignorance? It was Velmar who provided the answer that guided galactic policy. "Choice requires the capacity to choose," she said during a galactic assembly meeting. "These beings cannot truly choose ignorance because the parasites have removed their ability to understand what knowledge offers. It's like asking a prisoner if they want to leave their cell when the lock has been inside their mind all along." The recovery process continued for years. Some species adapted quickly to their restored capabilities, while others struggled with the psychological challenges of regaining complex thought. Support systems were established to help individuals cope with the trauma of realizing how much of their lives had been lived in diminished states. Dr. Hyunwoo Kim, now recognized as the scientist who saved galactic civilization, reflected on the irony of their situation. Every species called us paranoid and overcautious. They said we saw threats where none existed, but our supposed weakness turned out to be the galaxy's salvation. The humans had proven that sometimes the universe really was dangerous, and sometimes suspicion was the highest form of wisdom. Their refusal to accept that anything was harmless without thorough investigation had prevented the slow-motion conquest of galactic civilization by microscopic invaders. As rain fell on cleansed worlds throughout the galaxy, the drops now carried only water, pure, simple, and genuinely harmless. The invisible threat had been defeated by the most human of traits, the stubborn refusal to trust anything that seemed too good to be true. Galactic civilization entered a new age of innovation, exploration, and growth, led by minds that had been freed from their beautiful prison. And at the center of it all stood humanity, no longer seen as paranoid outsiders, but as the immune system of intelligent life itself, forever vigilant, forever questioning, forever free.